There are only the pursued, the pursuing, the busy, and the tired. F. Scott Fitzgerald, American novelist, essayist, and short story writer. All right, good morning and welcome to another morning episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. Speaking of early, it feels much more early to me. I was up way late past my bedtime, like way late. Look, I don't mean to sound like some, old man, but I mean, I'm kind of there. So, like, whatever. But last night, of course, yesterday, everybody knows Donald Trump was inaugurated as the president of the United States. So it is official. He is now the president. He is signing documents. He's doing things. He's getting on it already. In the middle of like going to all these like inaugurational balls and events and everything. Like he's taking time out and he's like, all right, like, all right, let's go to this event. Okay, now let's go down and sit down and let's free some people. Right. Like he's doing things. He's signing some executive orders. And I went to an inaugural ball. So I was invited by somebody that I know who kind of associates a bit with the Republicans, and he said, "Hey, there's this inaugural ball. Why don't you go?" Like the person leading it was like, "Hey, yeah, I know DL. Why don't you have him come too?" And so I did. And you might be kind of like surprised and say, "Well, wait a minute, DL, aren't you a libertarian? Like, why would you attend inaugural ball for the Republicans?" And the answer is actually not that complicated. The reason that I would attend is number one, I am currently the chair of the Libertarian Party here in Duval. And my view of a chair means that you get out and you meet people and you talk to them. How else do you bring attention to your party if you don't go and network with people? I think, and I'm going to kind of take a little bit of a detour here and we'll get right back. Um, it was a few episodes ago. I was talking about the bootstrap episode where, I think a lot of people misunderstand the value of networking. Networking is extremely valuable in this world, whether you like it or not. In fact, there's a well, before I get to that point, so when you're out trying to accomplish something, by and large, more than likely, you are going to need the assistance or the help from other people. Maybe you need, maybe it's something you need a bank loan, right? And that's going to be a little bit more rigid. There's going to be a process, and do you qualify? Do you not? But there might be, a time where knowing somebody kind of overcomes a limitation that you might have. And so I'll give you two quick stories, actually. Since we're talking about Donald Trump a little bit, I read his book. Um, what was his popular book? I'm tired, so if I forget stuff while I'm streaming, bear with me, folks. I'm doing my best. Show must go on. I'm delivering, and I'll do my best to make sure it's quality. But he had that Art of the Deal book, and I remember reading it years ago, long before he was a political, figure of any kind. He was just a real estate developer out of New York. And I remember reading it, and he was telling this story about he had a really long, hard day. Things were not going in his favor. I think some banks were really angry at him and they were coming after him. And he was like, I went home and I didn't, there was a party that I was supposed to attend. And he's like, I didn't really want to attend it. I was kind of beat down. I was a little frustrated. I just, I spent a lot of time at work. I needed a break, that kind of a thing. So he decided like, okay, you know what? I'm going to buck up and I'm going to go. So he went and ended up sitting down at a table next to one of the bankers that wanted his ass. And initially, the banker kind of gave him a cold shoulder a little bit. And then at some point, and I don't remember what the topic was, but he found a topic that the man was interested in and would open up, and they had a nice conversation. And he said at the end of the evening, that banker said, like, Donald, why don't you come to my office on, in the morning, and we'll see if we can't work out a deal. And so then he went and he was able to work out some deal, and and I don't remember the details exactly. But that is part of life. That is how life works. Sometimes, because we're human beings, we have emotions. Like, we're not all, robots. We're not robots where we just simply input output. Like, sometimes it might make sense, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes just shaking somebody's hand will go a long way. Another story, and this is, again, not my personal story, and this is this is a little bit more weird, if I'm trying to be like super professional here, but like I think it still matters. I remember a song by Cypress Hill, the old rap band back in the day. So if you know who Cypress Hill is, either I'm old or you are an old. That's one of the two, maybe both. And they had this song called Rap Star. I think they did a similar one like this, so, like one of those where they did two different types of two different songs, but they're basically the same. So they did one called Rock Star, one called Rap Star. And in the middle of it, there's like this interlude where Eminem is talking. And he's like, you know, he goes, I didn't realize how much work it was getting into rap music, but it's a lot of work. And he said, sometimes you got to go and you got to shake hands with somebody. You got to give them a pound, fist bump. And he's like, even though you don't want to, even though maybe that you don't like this person, but sometimes you have to play the game. The game, like you have to go and meet with people and talk with them and be cordial. And maybe you don't even like them, right? And that is one of the elements necessary for success. So, but that's not the whole reason that I went. The other reason that I went is just because, I these are people that I went to a inaugural ball here in Jacksonville, and many of these people I know personally, and I like them. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'll go and see some people that I know. I haven't seen them in a minute. We'll go and we'll see what's going on. Just kind of get a lay of the land and have a good time. Right. Like, so it wasn't really that big of a deal to me. Like, it wasn't, not everything that I do is all wrapped around politics, nor necessarily networking. Although the people that really do get into networking, they will tell you that they have had so many wins as a result of networking. And networking looks a little different. Like sometimes you go and, maybe you support somebody financially, maybe you just go to their events, maybe you talk about them, maybe you interact with them, all the above. There's variances. But I encourage you to go out and go to these things, and it's okay. Like I would have went to a Democrat one potentially had I don't know any really diehard members of the Democrat Party. I know a couple, but nobody invited me. So I didn't go. And, like it's that simple, really. And so I encourage you, even if you're a libertarian, to not be so hard nosed that you won't attend a function where you may, give some value to somebody or make a good connection. And a lot of times, like people say, "Wow, Deal, like you've done all these great things here in Duval as the chair." Well, a lot of that has just been stepping out and just doing stuff, meeting people, shaking hands, just do it. Like who is when there's a newcomer to politics and they win, who is that usually? That's the person that, you know, gets their good shoes out and they start walking the beat, basically. They go out and they knock doors, door after door after door after door, right? They're knocking doors, they're, shaking hands, kissing babies, all that good stuff, right? Because at the end of the day, you are dealing with humans. And if you can't remember that, well, then don't expect to get very far. So that's the reason I went, right? Like I was just, I have my differences with Republicans. Mostly really not Republicans as the people, but Republican policies. That's where I differ. But also, how am I going to get the word out about, my party that I'm in, the Libertarian Party, or just libertarian ideas? Well, you have to go and you have to talk to people. That's how it works. So, how did the event go? Um, you know, standard ball is nice. Yeah, they did a good job of putting on a nice event. And it was a cocktail attire, so I had a suit on. And the funny thing, and I was trying to tell my wife this morning, I actually got a better reception than I even realized. Like I knew that there would be a few people there that I knew. Um, but the reception that I got from the people that I know was interesting. Um, and the reason it was interesting is, so let me give you some backstory. As the chair here, I've happened to do I happened to do a couple of things that were really big deal for our party. And both of them are basically same. I hosted our party hosted two different. I wouldn't really call them debates. I always called them forums. So the first one was for city council, and we reached out to all the city council members that were running, and we're like, "Hey, we're going to set up at this church, and we would like to have a forum where we ask you questions. Here's the format, blah blah blah." And so a bunch of them came out, like eight. I think eight people came out, something like that. And at this time, we like our candidates that were running had already lost in their primaries. So the way it was not really the primaries, but they lost in the before the general election, because when you have like four, five, six people, then they basically do that runoff where they're like, okay, top two get to move on, and so we ended up not making it through that round, and so therefore I was like, well, how do we stay engaged? And I was like, how about we have a forum? And so we invited a whole bunch of candidates out and they came out and it was a really good forum. And we got a lot of praise for it, like how professional it was. We asked really good questions. It was, people to this day are like, yeah, that was really good. It was one of the best ones I attended, stuff like that. It was very objective. And I think that's what they liked about it. Like we didn't like no candidate felt like we were hitting them harder than we were another candidate. Not like those presidential debates where you're watching it and you're like, okay, we can tell whose side you're on, moderators. Like you couldn't do that with us. And so then the city council one did so well that when we came around to the next election, which was going to be school board, and we had eight people, well, roughly about eight people running. So I think there's nine school board districts, I think. And then four of them were up, the four of them had seats that were up for election, and there were basically 2 people for each one. But I think later a ninth person jumped in the race after our forum. So we were like, well, we did so well with that first one. Let's reach out and see if we could do one with the school board. And then we did one with the school board candidates. And I actually made some connections through that as well, connections that I still have today for politics. And so, like again, you have to step out and you have to do things. It's nice to get online and to shake your fist at people and maybe to troll people a little bit. But if you really want to have an impact, go out and meet people eyeball to eyeball. Basically, like that's what you need to do. So we had this school board forum, and that went really really well. In fact, I think it might have went even a little bit better than the first one because the first one we didn't really. It was like the first one we didn't really know what we were doing, and but we didn't fumble it either. We actually did a pretty good job. So there were a mix of people there last night from these events, and when I started talking to them, they remembered me and they were like, "Oh yeah, hey DL, how's it going?" Blah blah blah. It was, and we would kind of reminisce a little bit about the prior to their election because a lot of them did get elected, the ones that I met last night, and so that was pretty neat. And now they didn't get elected because of us, right? Like we didn't necessarily like we were just the objective moderator for these events. So we in no way necessarily contributed one way or another for these candidates. But it was nice meeting these folks. And when I met with them, some of them really kind of surprised me because they were like, oh well, I remember, they would talk to me about the things that we have done, and they would give me a lot of accolades. And one woman even was like, hey man, can I get a picture with you? I'd be honored to have a picture with you because you've done so much great work. And it was a little awkward feeling because I was like, I don't if you praise me to my face really a lot, which was happening, then I start to feel a little bit awkward. Just a simple, "Hey, you did a great job," is sufficient for me. Um, I like to say this joke: You think I would be better at receiving praise because I get so much of it, but no, not really. So anyway, so like I met with people and I got a warm reception from a lot of people, and so that was cool. And it was funny when me and another guy got there. We picked a table and we're like, we're gonna sit down at this table, and it was totally empty. And we're like, let's see who sits down with us, and we'll just go from there. And that was really cool because a local radio personality actually sat down right across from me. And I was like, "Oh, this guy that I gave a hard time to a couple years ago when our candidates were running for city council." I was like, "How convenient." And so some people were some of my friends when I was texting about that, they were like, "Oh, dude, did he know who you were?" And I was like, "I told him who I was." Because here's the thing. Um, yes, I was critical of this man online, and I swung pretty hard, or fairly hard. I mean, I wasn't a jerk about it, but I swung fairly hard at him, and I stand behind it. But I did it in such a way that when I met him last night, I wasn't embarrassed to introduce myself and be like, "Oh yeah, I'm DL Cummings, and you know what? Uh, let me just go hide over here because I don't want you to remember what I said online." No, that's not whatever I say online, I will own in person. And I will be like, "Yes, I said that." And all I did was I was like, "Oh, here's this guy sitting down in front of me. Well, what if that topic comes up? What do I say?" And so I just kind of mentally prepared, like, okay, if it comes up, this is what I'll say. And, either it will land and he'll be fine with it or he'll be mad. And we ended up not talking about it at all. And that's fine too. So, like there's a lot of lessons here in just me attending this inaugural ball, because I think a lot of people forget that, yeah, you can talk tough online, but you might meet this person in real life. And then if you meet them in real life, now we're adults and we expect that somebody's not going to come after us and try to fight us, but you never know. But more importantly, how is that conversation gonna be? Is it gonna be an awkward situation where you're sitting at a table and this person that you've been a total jerk to online sits down across from you, and now you have to be accountable for it, and now you have to try to figure out, "Okay, How am I going to have a conversation with this person who remembers all these nasty things that I said to them online? Right? Like that's a very uncomfortable situation. And since I was talking about networking, it makes your networking kind of plummet already. Because if you sit down next to somebody and you've been an absolute jerk to them, like it's not impossible to make amends. That happens. However, it is harder depending on what you've said. And because these events are always like good networking events, any kind of possible good that can come out from networking, you've made it just that much harder. Now, so like this is like there's lessons upon lessons in just me attending an inaugural ball. But I think these are good lessons. And if you are going to be involved in politics, then I think these are the kind of lessons that you need to hear about. And you need to hear like, yeah, it's okay, because I know some libertarians might be like, dude, why did you attend an inaugural ball? Donald Trump's a tyrant. Don't you believe? Yeah, okay, fine. I'm willing to say that a lot of people in Washington, like practically all of them, are tyrants, according to how, my radical views. However, those people that I interacted with are basically my everyday citizens, just like me. And at the end of the day, I might have to have a conversation with them. I might have to do a deal with them in the future. I might need the man that I sat next to is a trial lawyer. Like I might need to have a lawyer someday, and he might be the one that I come across. And so, or, maybe just sitting next to him and we have a conversation and it's a good conversation. He's like, yeah, I really like this guy. So he gives me his business card and he's like, yeah, man, if you ever have a need, why don't you call me up? Right. Like, so this is the reason why I work really hard to not say anything online that I'm not willing to be accountable for face to face. And sometimes I do talk a little harshly to people. And if I ever meet them, I will have to own that and deal with it. Right. And then the question is, okay, in that moment, what am I trying to accomplish? And how much has what I've said in the past going to be a stumbling block for accomplishing that? Even if accomplishing it only is I came to this party that I spent a good amount of money to get into. I want to just have a good time. Just want to hang out and have a good time. Okay, well, even that can be inhibited. So always be mindful of how you treat people because you never know who you're going to run into. You just don't. And if you just constantly make enemies, well, good luck. I hope you have things very well set up in your life because if you need people externally, if you don't have all your needs met, which most of you don't, then it could be a struggle for you. So that's that. Okay. So by the way, the guy that I sat next to, him and I were chatting it up about his kids, my kids, and we were just kind of talk about like education and things like that. And I stepped out of my comfort zone right before he left, and I was like, "Say, would you be willing to make a podcast appearance?" And he was like, "Yeah." He's like, I was like, "Yeah." I was like, On Fridays I do dad talk, so I will be reaching out to him to get him on dad talk, so that could be fun." So see what I mean by networking? Like I go and I just sit down, and eventually I find another guest for my show that I'm trying to grow. Right? Like, how cool is that? All right, let me get to some comments here, and we'll take a little bit of a intermission here. So let me see. And by the way, I just want to point out, folks, I am tired, and I did like virtually no prep for the show. I just was like, all right, let's talk about the inaugural ball. Let's talk about Donald Trump, his first day, some of the things that he's done, and then we'll call it a day. So, like, I am totally winging it this morning, and hopefully, I'm doing well, and you're not like, God, this guy's rambling, but I might be. But if I'm rambling, I apologize. All right. Anyway, let's see. Let's take a look at some comments here. All right. So, where do we want to go here? We want to go to this. All right. So let's see. Free Ross from Free Ross, Free Ross, tongue twister. That Liberty lady says free Ross. Yes. Now, to my knowledge, Donald Trump has not pardoned free It's not pardoned Free Ross. Has not pardoned Ross Ulbricht just yet. But I've seen several things on social media that strongly suggest he is. I think the strongest one that I saw was from Elon Musk, who tweeted that something to the effect of, "Yes, he will be freeing Ross too," something like that. He made a comment. I think he responded to somebody else. So I'm like, all right, well, if Elon Musk is saying right now this is going to happen, and we all know that he's been hanging out with Trump quite a bit, that's a lot of confidence there that it's gonna happen, and I will be honest, I was very, very skeptical that he would come through because I watched Donald Trump in his first term, and I was like, "You know, you didn't do a lot of things that you should have done or that you said you were gonna do." And a lot of people will go, "Well, yeah, but he had all these obstacles and people were against him and he didn't get the right people." And I'm like, "Okay, but that's fine, but for me, that's an excuse, and I'm not buying it." Because how many people could that apply to? How many people go to Washington and do not follow through or even attempt to follow through with what they say they're going to do? Like most of them. So there's no evidence, like there's really no, like, the evidence is stacked against Donald Trump for me. Cause I'm like, well, he didn't do these, like the wall. What effort did he put toward building a wall? He literally ran on building a wall. Now, I didn't want him to build a wall, but that's what he ran on. So I'm like, all right, well, what did you do? Well, he was blockaded by people. They did this and that. Again, that's a him problem. He got into. I'll say the same thing that I tell all my libertarian peers who decide that they're going to run for an office in their local libertarian party, and they get in there and they find out that's a lot harder than they realize. That's a you problem. You said you were going to do something. I want to see you deliver. You should have known what you were getting into in the first place. It would not be acceptable if I went out and I said, I'm going to get a construction job per se. And then I get to the job and then I'm not able to accomplish anything. And then later people go, DL, why were you such a terrible employee? And I go, well, I really didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't understand the vibe, the culture of the construction workers, and I wasn't really sure about all these tools. I thought I could do it. Like nobody's going to accept that for an answer. And so we would not accept that at our little peon level. We should not accept that at the federal level with people that we have basically hired to do their job. So the first time around, there's no history. So you promise that you're going to be different. Like, okay, fair enough. We'll see what happens. But then after you get in and I see that you didn't accomplish things as well, then now that becomes your record. That's the only thing I have to operate on. So if I don't have any information available to me that overrides the experience that I've observed and had, well, then that's what I'm going to go with. So I stand firm with being critical of Donald Trump and I was very skeptical. I'm very cynical, but it is looking like he will free Ross. So good. Absolutely good. Let's see. That Liberty lady says you and I both went to a Republican heavy election party. The Libertarian Party of Duval County also went to a Republican hobnob. Got to go where the people are. Absolutely. Where, like, if you want to influence anybody, what do? You go where anybody is, right? That's how it works. You want to, yes, I will go to libertarian events, but there's more than just libertarians in this world. And the truth of the matter is, most people are either Republican or Democrat. And so if I want to influence people, I will go where Republicans or Democrats are. It's pretty simple. And if the Democrat Party wants to invite me out to their events, I'll come out too if I can. Right? Simple. Oh, I know who sat across from you. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And it was fine. Like there was no, there was, like be critical of people, but don't be a jerk. That way, in case they sit across from you, you're ready. Let's see. I think that's all for comments here. Let's take a look. Yeah, I don't see any other comments, so I think we're good with that. Let me see. I'm just looking to see if there's any. Yeah, I think we're good with the comments. All right, let's continue on. Let's talk a little bit about. Trump and his first day. Now, back on the point of free Ross. So a lot of people were like, hey, he said he was going to free Ross on day one. Well, to my knowledge, that has not happened yet. So now the question is, did he fail to deliver on his promise? And I'm going to say no. Let's be a little fair and honest here. Like I get it. He was offering some pardons and signed a bunch of executive orders, and they're going to prioritize things, right? And he's got like a ton of things that he's going to be doing. So I was like, I'm going to consider January 21st, the end of 21st, as the conclusion of the first day. Because remember, he got sworn in yesterday at noon, and then he attended at least two parties or two events, right? Because he went to the inauguration, obviously, and then he went to an inaugural ball. He might have went to more than one inaugural ball. He might have stopped at some other places along the way, right? So it's not like he got sworn in and then just immediately did nothing but work the rest of the night, right? He had to attend some events, and he didn't even get sworn in until the middle of the day. So I think it's fair to say, like, look, if he frees Ross, he gives him a pardon today, then he has met his commitment that he made to the Libertarian Party when he came to our convention. That's what I'm gonna say about that. And I'm not gonna like, and I will be critical of anybody that's like, well, technically, the first day was yesterday. Yeah, let's try to let's try to be rational about this, okay? And let's not be like, if he takes a week to do it, then yeah, I'm gonna be like, whoa, what happened? Because like freeing Ross is literally signing a piece of paper. I've read, and I don't know this to be true, but I have read that technically, and it would have to be, it might be challenged, but technically, he could tweet out, "I'm freeing Ross," and supposedly that would also be legitimate because of the power that he has to pardon people. Now, I don't know that for sure, and it might be challenged, but because that's what people do in politics. But like, my understanding is that when it comes to pardoning people, like, it's literally the stroke of a pen. No ifs, ands, or buts. So, will I wait a week for it? Like, if it happens in a week, I mean, if it happens at all, that's a good thing objectively, period. It's gonna be a wonderful thing for Ross, his family, and his friends. Wonderful thing, and it'll be a good thing. Um, the longer that it gets delayed, the more critical I will be, simply because I know this is just a matter of a stroke of the pen. So what else did Donald Trump do? Well, he freed all of the January 6th protesters. He pardoned all of them, like some 1,500 or something like that. Good, good. They shouldn't. Okay, if we had only prosecuted and arrested those who were violent and those who destroyed or stole property that wasn't theirs, then I would be like, okay, that's legitimate. But people like grandmas that were just walking into the Capitol, that the Capitol Police just, like, opened the doors and removed things out of their way and said, "Hey, go right on in." Right? Like, they shouldn't be punished whatsoever. The government wasted a lot of resources on nothing. And then if you remember, a lot of people were like, "What about Ray Epps?" And people were like, like opponents, people that thought January 6th was the worst thing that ever happened in our country. They were like, "What do you mean? What about Ray Epps?" The FBI talked to him. And I'm like, okay, well, they talked to him, but why is he not going to jail? We got several videos of him going, "Let's go into the Capitol. Let's go do this." And I'm like, like, he was encouraging it, like, very plainly. And the people the people on the left, the Democrats, they were like, "Meh, not a big deal. We talked to him already." But then they're gonna go throw grandma in jail and be like, "Yeah, because she almost caused the destruction of our democracy." Like, okay, our democracy is not that brittle. Like, it can withstand a lot more than a bunch of old people going to the Capitol, walking around, taking selfies, and maybe going into rooms that they didn't belong going into. Like, if our nation is that brittle, like, we're in trouble. We are in serious trouble. So, no, we did not almost lose our democracy, and it's absurd to even think that. And it was even more absurd that people, had like, from my understanding, and I don't know any, I can't name any particular names, but from my understanding, there were people that weren't even present that got arrested. Like, that's just ridiculous. Like, I'm looking to actually put fewer people in jail, and then you have this, like, crowd of people, this group of people that seems to want more people in jail. I'm like, well, stop it. Stop putting people in jail. We can't help it. Like, if it's a violent crime or it's a property crime, then yes, people need to be punished and they need to, face justice. But outside of that, move on. Like, worry about something else. Worried about homelessness or something, or poverty. Or I don't know, worry about the fact that by 12th grade, less than 50% of our 12th graders are proficient in reading or math. How about you worry about that instead of worrying about grandma walking through, the halls of Congress or whatever. So anyway, what else did Trump do? Let's see. He signed an executive order that's really got people going. This is the one to end birthright citizenship. This one's kind of interesting. I'm going to be watching it closely to see how this plays out. So if you're not familiar with it, basically, 14th Amendment has always been understood as giving birthright citizenship. And Donald Trump signed an executive order that supposedly gets around it. I'm not sure. Like, when I just read it, I understand what the gist is, and maybe I can even pull it up and give you guys a little bit of an understanding of how this works. So let me see if I can't pull this up. Somebody was posting a whole bunch of these. Let's see here. So I'm going to scroll down. Let's see. Let's just kind of walk through. Now I'm seeing them on the screen. I don't have them up, but he withdrew from the Paris Agreement. So okay, fair enough. Um, let's see. Uh, Hiring freeze, a temporary freeze of hiring until the Trump administration is fully in place. Okay, I'm good with that. Like, we got Doge. We're trying to reduce the cost of the government. So a hiring freeze, always a good idea. Let's see, regulatory freeze. Do not propose or issue any rule in any manner, including by sending a rule to the Office of the Federal Register until a department or agency head appointed or designated by the president after noon on January 20th reviews and approves. Okay, that's cool. Like, yeah, we should not send regulations. In fact, I think we should roll back the regulations. Um, this one's funny. Return to in-person work. Heads of all departments and agencies in the executive branch of government shall, as soon as practicable, take all necessary steps to terminate remote work arrangements and require employees to return to work in person at their respective duty stations. I'm kind of on the fence with that one. So here's the thing. I work from home, so I get it. If you're being a productive employee, then that's all that matters. You don't have to be in an office. And as far as an office is concerned, that is overhead. So if the federal government has employees that can work remote and don't need to be in an office, then they should be working remotely. And if they're delivering, then they should continue to be employed. If they're not delivering because, they're busy out playing outside and, whatever, then fire them. Plain and simple. Same as you would with a regular business. And so, like, but on the other hand, like, I can understand where the government's like, no, we have all these buildings and, we're not getting rid of them. So we might as well use them. I don't know. I kind of lean more toward go ahead and work from home and fire people that aren't delivering. So let's see what else. End the weaponization in government. The Attorney General, in consultation with the heads of all departments and agencies of the United States, shall take appropriate action to review the activities of all departments and agencies exercising civil or criminal enforcement. Okay, that's fine. Restoring freedom of speech. This one, I don't, I'm just reading snippets of it, by the way. It is the policy of the United States to secure the right of the American people to engage in constitutionally protected speech. I don't like that we might even need an executive order for this is kind of scary. We literally have the First Amendment. We have case law. There should be no reason for a president to feel that it's necessary to write in it. Like, we should be looking at that and go, of course, we have freedom of speech. Yeah. But unfortunately, this is where we are. Because remember the Twitter files? Remember Mark Zuckerberg just recently coming out and saying, hey, he was pressured by the government to censor certain posts and certain topics? Yeah. That's why we have to have this, because the government's getting in and meddling where they don't belong. Twitter, TikTok, all these entities. We need to push back and say, whoa, 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 stay in your lane. Your lane is not micromanaging how people talk. That is not your lane. And we need to toss them out if they like if somebody is on board with silencing people, the moment we find out as citizens, throw them out. Right? Like, literally say, you're done, recall, whatever, get out of office. You are abusing the position that we have vested in you. Uh, Rescinding 78 Biden executive orders. This is why I'm not a big fan of executive orders, because if you remember, Trump signed a whole bunch of executive orders, and then, like, I don't know if it was his first day exactly, but right at the beginning of Biden's presidency, he just signed executive orders rolling back Trump's executive orders, and then Trump is now doing the same thing. So, like, how, like, I'm not a big fan of, like, oh, during my presidency, we'll sign this executive order and it will be good through my presidency, but after that, maybe the next president will undo it all. Like, that just, I don't think that government should operate like that. That just seems silly. So, but we'll see. Um, Here it is. Grant a full and complete and unconditional pardon to all other individuals convicted of offenses related to events that occurred at or near the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. Extending the TikTok deadline. I believe that was in the bill. If you go read the bill, there was a provision that the president could extend the deadline, I think, one time. So he did that. Uh, Withdraw from the WHO. You know, the problem with these organizations like this is that they try to be more than just informative. They try to, um, enact rules and regulations. So as far as withdrawing from the WHO, good. Absolutely. I support it. The WHO, which would be a fine organization to just be informative to governments, and then maybe have representatives from different governments join their organization. They should only just be like, "All right, United States, you've got this COVID thing going on. Here are some things that might apply to you." And then they might say, "Okay, Pakistan or whoever, like, here's some things that might apply to you because you guys are an entirely different country with, maybe a different type of infrastructure. Maybe you've got a different culture, those kind of things. So based on our knowledge, we're going to say, here's some ways that you might deal with this, this pandemic or something like that." So an informative, but with no teeth, so that they can inform people, and people can refer to them and say, "Well, the WHO said." I mean, that's fine, but no teeth. But so yeah, I think I'm good with that, and I believe mostly the reason that he did it was because we're funding it at a disproportionate amount as to countries like China. Because I think he was saying, while he was signing it, he was like, "Well, we have this many millions of people. China has this many billions of people, like 1.4 billion or something like that." And he was like, "And look how much they're paying, and look how much we're paying." He's like, "Yeah, that doesn't work for me." So I think Trump did it on the basis of how much money we were spending, more than anything, and that's fine with me too. But I do think that the WHO at best should just be an information hub, and where they maybe put together and compile a bunch of information from all different sources around the world, and then just kind of be somewhat of like a central repository for that. That's a good role for them, in my opinion. But otherwise, they could say, "Hey, United States, you should do this," and we could say, "Good advice, but yeah, we're going to do something different," and I think that would be perfectly acceptable. Restore accountability. I don't know what that means. Some of these I'm just reading like a quick snippet, and like without reading the whole executive order, so that's why I'm like skipping it. I want to get to the one though. National emergency at the border. The Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of each relevant military department is appropriate and consistent with applicable law, shall order as many units or members of the armed forces, including the Ready Reserve and the National Guard. Let me click on this to show more here. National Guard, as the Secretary. Oops, it moved on me. Where'd you go? There it is. As the Secretary of Defense determines to be appropriate to support the activities of the Secretary of Homeland Security in obtaining complete operational control at the southern border of the United States. Okay, so this is one where I have a bit of a problem, and here's why. Number one, a lot of people have been like, "Hey, the Biden administration is allowing and even helping, assisting all of these, huge numbers of migrants coming into the country. We have a crisis at the southern border." Oh, okay. So now that we have a different president, presumably that action would stop. Like he's not going to bus people to different cities. He's not going to drop off. He's not going to fly, hundreds of people or thousands of people to a city and just dump them in there. So if that's no longer happening, then the question is, do we still have a national security issue at the border, or do we go back to the days prior to um, the Biden administration, right? I think we have to think about this. Like, what exactly is causing this national security issue or this national emergency at the border? Is it just that people are just flooding over and we can't control them? Okay, well, that might be an issue to take care of. But from my understanding, a lot of the criticism of the Biden administration was that they were actively assisting people in coming into the country and using transportation means to get them to different places and drop them off in large numbers. So if that is not happening, then now what is the situation? Has the situation basically gone down to like, do we still need the National Guard and other military units at the border if that's not happening? That's not the question that what people are asking, because I think people are just getting too worked up about, oh my God, people are coming in, they're taking our gerbs, right? That kind of stuff. And so I think we're not critically thinking about this, and whether or not, stopping one action really puts a dent into this issue that we've been seeing. And there is a border issue. I would say the border issue is mostly that our process needs to really be worked on. And like it's a bad process right now, and it's causing us to have a lot of problems. So I think we need to just revamp it, just ditch it and start over, practically. Let's see, what else do we got in here? Let's see. I'm gonna try to go to the one. Where is it? Do. Oh, here it is. American citizenship. So let's take a look at this one. Um, it is the policy of the United States that no department or agency of the United States government shall issue documents recognizing United States citizenship or accept documents issued by state, local, or other governments or authorities purporting to recognize United States citizenship to persons, one, when that person's mother was unlawfully present in the United States, or the person's father was not a United States citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time of said person's birth, or when that person's mother's presence in the United States was lawful but temporary, and the person's father was not a United States citizen or lawful permanent resident at the time of said person's birth. So basically, this idea that you can come over here, be born in the U.S., and automatically have citizenship, they are challenging it. At least I think they're carving out a small issue. So it's not necessarily going to be anybody. And let me see if I can pull up. I can pull this up really quickly because I can give you a gist of what this is really all about. Let's see, where is it here? Do. Okay, so this comes from I think his name is Billy Binion, and he's a reporter at Reason Magazine. So here's what he said: the birthright citizenship executive order is plainly illegal. It doesn't just exclude babies born to unlawful immigrants, it also excludes those born to people on legal temporary visas, which is blatantly unconstitutional. If you say you care about the Constitution, you can't defend this. The debate over the 14th Amendment, here's where you're going to learn where everything is where the argument is being had. The debate over the 14th Amendment comes down to the bit that says a kid is a citizen if they're born to someone, quote, subject to the jurisdiction, end quote, of the United States. There's no serious legal argument that people here on lawful visas are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. And so let me see if I can't find the exact quote from. Okay. So the amendment, the 14th Amendment reads in part, all persons born or naturalized in the United States comma, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, comma, are citizens of the United States. So this is the argument whether we're talking about subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And who does that refer to? Now, there's case law already that suggests that it's already been settled. We'll see how this plays out in court. But basically, when you write a sentence, if you put that comma in there, that comma kind of like separates one clause from another. And so in this statement, all persons born or naturalized in the United States, comma, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof suggests that there are also people who are born or naturalized in the United States who are not subject to the jurisdiction and therefore are not citizens. That's kind of the implication here. And so the courts are going to have to fight this one out and determine, like, okay, is this legitimate? Is this not? The courts and the lawmakers and all that. So we'll see how this plays out. Personally, I don't think that we should. I don't think that birthright citizenship is our problem. In past episodes, I have talked and I said, look, the problem appears to be largely the asylum process. So the asylum, and we talked about this in one of my immigration episodes. I think it was the second one that I did, where the asylum process allows people to go online and they can sign up for, say, hey, I want to be an asylee in the United States, and there's criteria for coming through to asylum. And then what happens is they get here, and then there's a backlog. So the court says, okay, well, you know, Mr. Sanchez, because you might come from Mexico. Mr. Sanchez, your court date is in a year. So go and come back. And then sometimes Mr. Sanchez would go and maybe he'll come back. And sometimes he might say, well, I've made it to the US and the going to my court hearing is only going to get me through to the legal process. But, maybe he forgets. Maybe he decides that he doesn't really need to go through that process. He's doing just fine, working under the table, what have you. And then some people don't come back and then they stay. And some of those people are people that are committing violent crimes. Right. And then there are some people that have just snuck over here playing straight up and they're committing violent crimes or, other kind of, illegal, like serious illegal activities. And so that's the problem that we have is that not everybody is necessarily coming through and then uh, going through the process in full. Some people are skipping the process altogether. Some people are starting the process, but then not completing it. There's a variety of things. So to me, I look at it and I say, it sounds like what we really need to focus on is the process. And once we deal with the process, then we can determine if other things are a problem. But right now, since we know that this is a problem, I would object and say, I don't think that we need to worry about birthright citizenship because, like our people, like when people come over here and then they get this citizenship, how are they behaving after that? Are they just behaving terribly? I would imagine that, based on my experience with people, most of them are not. So I would argue that it's that in itself is not really the core of the problem. And it's not what we need to address. What we need to address is the process under which people are coming here and making sure that it's a meaningful and streamlined process. And until that happens, I'm not really interested in hearing any other arguments. I want to start with one thing and see what we get with that. So I guess technically there are two things that I would say should really put maybe three things. We'll say three things that we need to do regarding immigration. Number one, if you come here and you commit a violent crime, out, bye, gone. You come here, you assault somebody, right? Like you, and I'm not, I'm like, if you're speeding, I don't care about that. I mean, you shouldn't be speeding, but that's not an offense that I think you should, like half Americans speed. Not worried about that. If you come here and you commit a violent crime, if you threaten people, those kind of things, get out. We don't want you. You ruined your opportunity. So now that's the number one. Number two, second thing that we should do is clean up our process. and we should streamline it, and we should try to improve it so that it's faster and better. Right now, we should not have a backlog. We should not have this remain in Mexico policy idea where we're like, okay, we got so many, we're just going to set up this weird camp over in Mexico, and you just stay there until we get to you. Like that, just no. Like I think we can do better than that. Um, and then the third thing that I think, what was the third thing? I done lost my mind. This is what happens when you're spitballing a show. Well, there's a third thing, and when I remember, I'll tell somebody somewhere. I'll post it online. I should have wrote it down while I was thinking. But anyway, so but those are the kind of things that I think that we should do to improve our immigration system, right? We should focus on where we know are the pain points and deal explicitly with only the pain points and the fewest possible, so that we can get a better handle of whether or not it's actually being effective. So that's the kind of things that's now. I will say this. I'll say one more thing, and then I think we'll just kind of close the show on this matter. Um, in one of the executive orders, Trump designated cartels as foreign terrorists. And then he also said, we're going to bring back Remain in Mexico. Now, I'm not sure that Remain in Mexico is actually going to come back because Mexico has already said a long time ago, they said, yeah, we're not interested in doing that again. So without their cooperation, I don't think it's going to work. Um, but here's the thing. If you say, like, if you go and you look in the information, if you go look it up, you're going to find that there was practically a humanitarian crisis because a lot of these cartels and these gangs, they were targeting people in these camps that we were putting them in. And there are stories of people like losing their husbands and their children, like children were kidnapped, right? So we have a problem with the cartel. So think of it this way. If we say that the cartels are foreign terrorists, so that gives us more latitude on how we can deal with them. And then we say we're going to open up Remain in Mexico and we're going to send people to this camp where they've already been waiting and dealing with the cartels, then what we're saying as Americans is people that want to come here and make a better life, we're going to place you in harm's way close to terrorists. That's our answer. I find that objectionable because we're supposed to be America. We're supposed to be the best. And sure as hell can we, I mean, we surely can do better than people that want to come here and start a new life. We can do better than saying, go wait over there by the terrorist. And if we can't, then there's no make America great again. If we can't accomplish helping people come over here and become awesome Americans that we would love to live next door to, that we would love to rent to, that we would love to hire. If we can't, if the best we can do for people that want to be that next great American that we're proud to be friends with, if the best we can do is tell them, wait over there by the terrorist, we're not America anymore. We're not great. So stop talking about like, oh, we're so great and awesome. The best we can do is subject people to terrorism while they wait to be one. Like, really? Really? So think about that, America. Think about like how we're doing this because being the best means that we have the best ideas, the best processes. That's what being the best means. And if that's the best we have to offer, we're not the best. All right, let me get some comments here. And then we'll close out the show. So, what do we got here for comments? I know we got a few more. All right, I'm trying to pull up my screen so that I can see everything here. Let's see. Ross is free. My vote for a proven warmonger, deficit spending, tariff raiser, bump stock banner candidate was so worth it. Sarcasm. I mean, look, I get it. There's an argument to be made. Should libertarians have supported Trump solely on the grounds that he would free Ross? Now, I'm going to look at it very simple. I'm just going to be like, he should free Ross. President Biden should have freed Ross. Ross should have never been put in jail in the first place. If it takes Trump doing it, then fine. I will celebrate and be happy about that. Will I still be critical of Trump and everything else? Oh, absolutely. I would be critical of Trump. I would be critical if it were Biden, or I guess in this case, Kamala Harris. If Chase Oliver had won, which I know is not going to happen, but if the Libertarian had won the office, I would be critical of him too. Probably more so because I'll be like, hey, you're on my team. Don't embarrass me, you know? But we should always be critical. But I think we also have to learn to delineate a little bit and say, this is objectively a good thing. Now, the way that we went about it, as far as the party is concerned, we can have that argument and say that's not the best way to have gone about it. We should have done something. We should have accomplished this in a different way. That's fine. That's a fair argument to have. Let's see. The English language changes. Kegela says the English language changes. Be careful if you read the rules for picking congressmen. It's not reasonable in modern English. Yes, agreed. He also said, if we ended the welfare state, these problems would cease. Big question, would non-government charities help those in need? I agree. Like, that's another point, is that our welfare state, and I'm not going to get into the argument of like who uses the welfare state more, because some people will go, well, Americans actually use the welfare state more. Okay, well, you know what the word more means? That means it's more, not instead of. Right? Like, nobody's saying, like, the people that are defending it aren't saying, "Well, immigrants actually don't use welfare." No, they're saying, "Oh, they use it less." Okay, but they still use it, and they shouldn't. Nobody should be getting welfare to begin with. But if you ask me, like, which ones should we deal with? Americans getting welfare, or non-US citizens getting welfare? Who should we start dealing with? Well, I'm going to say the non-citizens. Let's start with the people that are not citizens, that could technically be deported, that may not be paying taxes. Not that I agree with taxes. However, again, if you're asking me for a starting point, then I'm going to start with non-citizens, people who are, illegal immigrants, and say you should not get welfare. And then once we get that settled, then I'm going to turn and look at my fellow neighbors. I don't think any of my neighbors, my direct neighbors, actually are on welfare, but I'm going to look at my fellow Americans and say, you should not be on, or you should not be getting welfare. And if you get something from somebody, it needs to be something from somebody who is deciding with what they own that they want to give you. So if there's an organization, Fred's uh, homeless organization, that's not a really good name, but bear with me, and Fred collects donations from everybody and says, I'm going to feed the homeless. And then he goes and he buys food and he feeds the homeless, and they get free food, food at no cost to them. And fine, that's great. That was all voluntary. And that's the way that it should be. But it's not voluntary when the government's doing it. So yeah, I'm going to start with one group, and then we're just going to work our way until nobody's getting it. That's where I stand. Okay, let's see. I think that's all for the comments today. So let's close this show out. Before I do, though, do me a favor. If you enjoy the show, be sure to like and subscribe to my channel. Where's that button? There it is. And for the really serious folks out there, I want you to hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. You know what? It didn't turn on me. Why did it do that? How about this? How about we try this way? There it goes. There it goes. My like and subscribe button. Click, click, ding. Right? All right. So make sure you hit that bell. Don't you miss an episode. And then, thank you so much for watching. Hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me on Monday, or catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. You can also be part of the community by heading on over to libertydad.locals.com. Okay, it's a little different than the previous two. libertydad.locals.com. Join the community, $5 a month. We'll have conversations about the direction of the show, the topics that I talk about, all those kind of things. And then we'll also have subscriber only videos. So do that. Be part of the show. Let's help this show grow. That's the goal for 2025, to make this show grow. And then for me to deliver better and better and better. So by the end of the year, the goal is that when you're watching the show today and then when you watch it at the end of the year, you're like, damn, he got way better. He really worked hard. I'm glad that I supported him. That's the goal. Remember, last but not least, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.